What is going on, everybody? James Hancock here, and back to review Episode 8 of Star Trek Picard, Season 3, an episode called Surrender, which immediately made me think of that Cheap Trick tune, but it had very little to do with the story of this particular episode, one that was written by Matt Okamura and directed by Deborah Kampmeyer. And I should mention that a couple weeks ago, I had the privilege of being part of a panel interviewing Matt Okamura over on the Popcast Brothers live stream, and I'll leave a link down in the video description below. And if you have not yet seen the episode, go do so because all spoilers are fair game in this discussion. And as always, I have to offer my obligatory apology for posting my review far later than I would like to, but I have actually two really good excuses this week. One of my oldest friends came into town last night, and one beer turned into many, so I was a little hungover. But also this morning, I had to do some work for my accountant for tax season. Taxes are right around the corner, so if you've not filed your return, this is my gentle reminder that everybody needs to get on top of that. But let's talk some Star Trek. We had some Star Trek news since last week, and it's not necessarily news that I'm all that excited about, because the only news that I want to hear that I've not heard yet is that Terry Matalas and his fleet of amazing writers have been given the green light to give a Star Trek legacy. However, we received news that there is a new Alex Kurtzman show, Star Trek Starfleet Academy, and everything I heard about it just sounded lame as hell, and I will not be watching it. And some might make the case that we need to watch all Star Trek shows in order to make Star Trek feel robust and healthy and popular, which will indirectly lead to Star Trek legacy coming our way. But life is short and these shows are long, and I don't have room in my media diet to watch shows that I'm not invested in. And Alex Kurtzman burned his bridges with me as a consumer of Star Trek content a long time ago. So I'm more than happy to keep rewatching Star Trek Picard Season 3 over and over again in order to help generate the numbers that might lead to Star Trek legacy. But I will be ignoring Starfleet Academy and avoiding it like the plague. But let's dive into this episode, which gave us one hell of a reunion where we actually got to have a scene at the end of the episode where all 7 surviving members of the Next Generation crew got to have one of their classic kind of roundtable discussions or roundtable meetings, and I was just doing cartwheels, especially when Data said there's no place in the universe that he would rather be. I was like, you know what? I know the feeling. There's no place in the universe I would rather be than watching y'all strategize about what comes next. And sadly, there are only 2 episodes left, which for me feels like these last 2 episodes are going to finally be the Next Generation movie that we've always been wanting all these years, and we're finally going to get. And I've been hearing some rumblings and some rumors over at Robert Meyer Burnett's channel where it sounds like he was trying to acknowledge without actually officially acknowledging that these last 2 episodes are going to play theatrically. And I have seen no news on Fandango yet, but if I get a chance to see those episodes in the theater, fuck yeah, sign me up. I will be there because I feel like most of the season's been very cinematic, but I imagine a lot of the special effects budget has been reserved and saved for these last 2 episodes. So who the hell knows what is in store for us. But this episode was very solid overall. I thought it was a big bump up from the previous episode. I think I'm not alone in thinking that episode 7 was the weakest of Star Trek Picard Season 3, but this episode was very satisfying on several fronts because we more or less wrapped up the storyline of Vadic and the Shrike. We got some great revelations and some new info when it comes to Jack, and of course we got to see the epic confrontation inside the mind of Data and Lore as Data uses the ultimate act of subterfuge, slowly but surely surrendering his memories over to Lore. And Lore is just gobbling up these memories like popcorn. And a lot of these memories consisted of very moving flashbacks, including an image of Denise Crosby as security chief Tasha Yar, who was sadly killed toward the end of season 1. I mean, she got to make a few cameos throughout the rest of the 7 seasons. But I can remember being in 5th grade thinking holy shit, they just killed a member of the crew. But anyway, I always loved Denise Crosby, especially in Pet Sematary, a very disturbing horror movie. But I must admit that the memory that Data shared with Lore that moved me the most, and I'm going to sound like a big softy by acknowledging this, but when he shared the memory of Spot, and I'm getting misty-eyed even thinking about it, I don't know why, but those scenes between Data and Spot back in the 90s always got to me. And the only scene that really didn't work for me this episode, and it kind of came out of the blue, was when Raffi suddenly goes on this giant killing spree, taking out changelings, and I get they wanted to show that all the training she's been doing with Worf finally reached its conclusion, and now she is a badass warrior in her own right. But I don't know, it just felt out of place in an episode that was so focused on reuniting the key 7 members. It was almost as if Matt Okamura decided, oh shit, we've forgotten to use Raffi in a scene for a while. Let's give her a big moment so that she can feel like a part of the episode. And it just felt kind of thrown in. But whatever. If the worst thing you can say about an episode is that it threw in what felt like a gratuitous random fight scene, no harm, no foul. But let's slow down a little bit and kind of dig into the weeds or the details of some of these big scenes. So let's talk first about the villain Vadic, who was finally disposed of this episode in dramatic fashion as they basically throw her out the evacuation hatch on the bridge, whereupon she freezes and then shatters upon the hull of the Shrike. And I guess now that we can see the totality of her story, I would say as a villain, she ranks at like a B. I mean, she's not going to be anybody's favorite kind of mustache twirling sci-fi villain. But I thought Amanda Plummer did a good job with the material she was given. I guess her whole shtick got a little one note over time, but on the whole, she was a very solid villain. And she actually carried through on her promise, where she said that she was going to start executing members of the crew for every 10 minutes that Jack refused to surrender, hence the name of the episode. And it reminded me of that old expression, the beatings will continue until morale improves, but in this case, obviously, the executions will continue until morale improves. And it's through Vadic's interactions with Jack where we learn what more or less their goals have been all this time, where these gifts, these abilities that Jack is slowly starting to understand and take advantage of, the changelings want those gifts for themselves, and she's promising that she can help him understand these voices that he's hearing and what's beyond the red door. But as tempting as that arrangement might be, ultimately Jack decides to play a role in Vadic's execution. And also, he's got Troy now to help him navigate all these strange memories and abilities. And I thought the episode ended on a pretty good cliffhanger as Troy and Jack kind of go hand in hand into his mind and prepare to open this strange metaphysical red door in his mind. Because when Troy first steps foot on the Titan, as great as it is to see this incredible reunion of these 7 characters, in her words, she says she detects an all-consuming darkness on the ship. So I, for one, am looking forward to learning more about what this all-consuming darkness might be and what the connection might be with Picard. Because as we also learned this episode, when the changelings snagged Picard's body, they removed the part of his brain that was tied into the syndrome that both he and Jack share. And I wish I had some awesome hot take about the connection between Picard and Beverly and this syndrome and Jack, but I'm totally at a loss, so I'll just have to wait and see. But we also got some great scenes between Riker and Troy this episode, and they more or less have gone through a reconciliation, and we learned that Troy is able to perceive when the changelings are imposters, which will obviously be a very useful skill over the last 2 episodes. And I thought one of the most hilarious moments all episode was when Riker is explaining to Troy how he gave Vadic a compromised code and that he suspects that Picard is setting one of his classic traps as they speak. And of course, Picard is totally screwed because, as we see, Picard is basically grasping at straws. And unless they can find a way to remove the partition that would allow Data and Lore to merge, they're going to be unable to regain control over the ship. I mean, at this point, Vadic has total control. She's hunting down the crew one at a time, executing people, and even if it means running the risk of losing Data forever, they finally convinced LaForge to remove the partition and allow this kind of telepathic battle to take place between Data and Lore. And I thought it was a pretty cool scene. As I mentioned before, I really liked seeing how Data used the act of surrendering his memories as a way of kind of converting Lore into Data. And there was a really interesting moment where Data explains to Lore that Data has had everything all this time and Lore has had nothing. And it was cool just seeing how what appeared to be trophies for Lore ultimately turned out to become a trap, making them merge into one being. And after all these decades of Data trying to understand feelings and love and what it means to be human, it seems like Data's journey towards being like a complete human being or a complete being, I don't know if you want to call him human or not, but Data more or less now understands what the human experience is all about. And they gave us a bunch of great scenes between LaForge and Data. And one of the most emotionally powerful moments all season is toward the end of this episode, where it's just a scene between Data and LaForge, and Data expresses his gratitude for LaForge's friendship all these years. It was just a very satisfying emotional beat that took me back to the great heyday of The Next Generation. But as far as the remaining highlights are concerned, I thought Mata Kimura threw some really good lines in there, like when Picard proves himself or proves that he's not a changeling to LaForge by referring to LaForge's pedestrian taste in wine. I thought that was absolutely fucking hilarious. And there was another great line that he gave to Worf, where after saving Riker and Troy, Worf says, "I've counted the days since I last saw you, like waves in the ocean, constant and unending." I mean, there's so many writers out there who have struggled with giving voice to Worf, but I feel like Mata Kimura really zeroed in on this idea where he has to be poetic, he has to be philosophical, and he has to be deadly all at once. And Madakumura more or less nailed it. And he also gave us some really good scenes between Seven of Nine and Shaw. And Shaw's been more or less having to take a back seat the last few episodes. And I'm hoping that Shaw obviously will get to be the captain of the Titan in Star Trek Legacy. But it was interesting seeing the debate between Shaw and Seven of Nine and how he's saying that she should have let him die. And she insists that she would make the same call all over again. And she demands that he now refer to her as Seven of Nine. And it was cool seeing at the very end of the episode when it came to giving someone the honor of actually issuing the order to destroy the Shrike. Shaw passes the baton to Seven of Nine, and she makes it happen. So I'm really hoping that those two characters will be reunited in Star Trek Legacy, but we'll just have to wait and see. But I'm doing a quick scan of my notes, and I think I've tackled all the highlights that jumped out at me. So just as a way of wrapping up this video, let me just reiterate. I will not be watching Star Trek Starfleet Academy. I'm dying to see Star Trek Legacy, and I'm dying to see the last 2 episodes of this season in the theater, if that does in fact end up happening, especially if we can get earlier access to the episodes by going to the theater. But no matter what, can't wait to see what the conclusion of the season has in store for us. It's been a hell of a ride every step of the way, and I've just loved having Star Trek back in my life for the last 8 weeks. It's been so much goddamn fun, but I think that's all I got to say. So if you enjoyed this video, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, hitting that notification bell. But thanks again for watching. I really appreciate it, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.